Let's start with a very interesting pro-revenge story. My principal tried to get me fired, so I got her fired from the district. I was in my mid-20s, fresh out of grad school, and ready to start my teaching career. I got a job at a Title I elementary school near my home teaching art, and I was super excited that I could walk to work. However, I was so far into La La Land that I didn't notice any of the warning signs. Warning sign number 1. It was a week before school started, and I had called and emailed the school office staff and my principal to ask about getting my keys and badge so I can start seeing what I needed to do to get ready for the school year. No response and no answer from either. So I called the district office and asked when and where I could pick up my keys and badge. 2 days before school starts, I get an email from my admin that I should have been more patient and not have contacted the main office about my keys and badge. I finally got everything and was able to get into my room and was horrified with how much I had to get done. Apparently they had used my room as storage, so it was loaded with tables and desks stacked on top on each other, 8 filing cabinets, and well over 100 chairs stacked all around the room. I managed to clean out the space with help from my awesome custodian. Shout out to all custodians who are the secret backbones in helping teachers get ready for the school year. Hurdle number 1 finished. Warning sign number 2. It's now the day of classes starting, and I haven't been informed of what the schedules are, as in which days I see certain classes and when. So I email my principal, again, asking what the schedule looks like, and if there is a digital document that I can print out. I get an email back a few minutes later telling me to stop pressuring and bullying her. I replied, sorry if I was making her feel that way, but it would be nice to know what classes I had and when. This leads to warning sign number 3. It's 8:10 a.m., not 10 minutes after school started, and I finally get my schedule, only to find out that I have 2 classes at the same time. Note, my school isn't huge, but we still had 14 classes serving kinder 6th grades, so I was having at least 46 kids in one classroom by myself. Moreover, I had 7 45-minute periods a day, and saw every class every day of the week, with only a 30-minute lunch. My lunch was when I was on lunch duty. I asked my principal if there was any way we could adjust the schedule, so I had time to plan and get the classroom ready for the next class and wouldn't lose instruction time getting things ready as the new class was coming in. I got yelled at by her with a class waiting outside saying it was my first year teaching and I didn't know what I needed and needed to just deal with it. Well, I decided not to just deal with it, and I read the teacher's contract for the district. Come to find out, we had a section about classroom size. It stipulated that if you had a class over 30 students, you get to have an educational assistant to help you with the class. I brought this up with my principal after a month and a half of struggling, and was, you guessed it, denied and told there was no money in the budget and I would have to make do without it or quit. Mind you, I am stubborn and determined to make things work with what little I have. But things were rough. In order to prep and plan everything for the next day, make meaningful grades, keep up with referrals, and keep in contact with families. I was having to be at the school from 6 a.m. when the morning custodian arrived till 9 p.m. when the night janitor was leaving on weekdays, and then also use my weekend time to continue to plan and grade. When I came time for my first teacher evaluation, I was dreading it. However, I got all satisfactory mark from my principal. I was shocked. Little did I know this was a plan she had all along. A few more weeks go past, and I talk with our union about the double classes and say, it's not sustainable, and a classroom my size can't safely fit more than 30 students, let alone 46 students. And they said they would handle it, and another few weeks go by and nothing. It's not the week of Thanksgiving, and conferences are over, and I get to not worry about anything for 2 days. So I decided to go to a potluck dinner with some old friends of mine. So here is the best part, and maybe the part that saved my career and even maybe my sanity. I was talking with one of an old acquaintance and his new husband about what teaching job I landed and how the school year was going. I let it slip that even though my students were amazing and had such creative minds, it's frustrating to me that I don't have the time to give to them that they deserve, And with 2 classes at once, it's hard to get around to everyone in the class in just 45 minutes. I noticed the husband raise his eyebrow and ask me what school I worked at. So I told him, what harm could it do? Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between, little did I know I was talking with my principal's supervisor. I found out the next Monday when my admin stormed into my room at 8:05 a.m. to scream and yell at me, threatening to fire me and make sure I never work in education again. I was shocked and confused at the time. However, later that week at our staff meeting, we talk about a change in the schedule and how only on class would be in my class at a time for an hour now, and I would only see them twice a week instead of all 5 days. It was magical. The kids were happier, I was calmed, was able to help each individual student if they needed it, and was able to plan enough throughout the day so I could leave at 4 p.m. Sad to say, my happiness didn't last forever. I noticed my principal stalking my room and coming in non-stop to observe me. It was awkward. I also had a few of my very extroverted students come in quiet and unable to focus on work. But when I asked them if everything was okay, they would burst into tears and say, "I don't want you to go." Being confused, my response was always, "Oh, student name, I have absolutely no intentions of going anywhere. You are all the best students a teacher could ever ask for." Which would cheer them up for a while, but then they would come in next week upset again. It all clicked when the day before we left for Christmas break, my principal came into my room with one of her minions, who was out building union representative, to tell me I was being put on a teacher support plan. This plan was to evaluate whether or not my contact with the district would be up for renewal at the end of the school year. I was shocked, and my union rep just snickered and walked away giggling with our admin. I felt sick and abused, unable to feel any emotion. It wasn't until I got home and read when this plan detailed was I seeing red. I had hit my breaking point. This is when I started to formulate a plan of revenge. Some things to note: our principal liked to come into school whenever they felt like. She would be there anywhere from 7:45 a.m., our actual contract hours, to as late as 9:30 a.m. She once showed up at noon without telling anyone. I also knew that she had kept revealing a certain after-school care contractor that wasn't free to families, but they got money from district to offer it for free. I also knew that this person running and after-school care was dating and living with our principal. So during winter break, my acquaintance and his husband called and asked if I free to get drinks over the holidays. I love a good cocktail and I needed some hard liquor. When we met up, I wanted to talk about anything other than school stuff. I just wanted to keep my mind off of school drama. But the new husband brought up if things were better after he had talked about the double classes. That was when I found out that he was her boss. I asked, "What do you mean you talked to my principal? How do you know her?" New husband: "Oh, you didn't know? I'm the supervising administrator for that cohort of schools." My jaw dropped, and I started to hyperventilate. The husband was startled and asked what was wrong. So I told him. I told him everything. How she yelled and threatened to get me fired, how she put me on this support plan, and how she just kept observing my class without notifying me. His face went from a concerned look to surprised Pikachu face to red with anger. He told me, "I really always had a bad vibe from her, and always wondered why there were always so many new teachers at that school every year. What else can you tell me about what's going on?" I hesitated, tell him everything, but my acquaintance told me not to worry. He has seen this look before, and that we were on my side. So I told him everything I knew. They both just sat there, awestruck, unable to speak about what they were hearing. Anyway, after break is over, I am dreading coming back into my class, but I don't want to miss seeing my students. So I push on. I am walking in the hall to my mailbox, and I see a few my students that had cried and told me they didn't want me to leave. They ran up and gave me the biggest, longest hug ever, saying, "You're here! You're here!" Me: "Of course I'm here. I wouldn't leave the best students ever. Now would I?" Students: "But principal said you were going to leave us because you didn't want to be here, and we should give you trouble before you left. Me? Trying to hold my rage. Oh, maybe she talking about how I was leaving for visit family over the break. No need to worry, I'm still here. Yes, all this wretched woman tried to purposely make kids misbehave in my class to write me up for not having good rapport with my students. I was beyond livid. So next time I have class with that student, I ask them if they could make a comic book of the conversation they had with my principal when she told them I was leaving, and make an ending he wanted. Phase 1 started. Phase 2, I contacted my boss's boss and told him per my contract, I wanted another admin to accompany my principal's teacher support observations. And I wanted it to be him. He said absolutely, but not to tell my principal just yet. The first day of my observation comes, and she walks in without a notebook or anything to take any sort of notes, looking proud of herself like she is about to get away with firing me. She is shocked and confused when he bosses walks in with a laptop and sits next to her and starts typing notes about how I'm doing. She stumbles around and comes to ask me for a notepad to take notes, and I tell her, I don't have an extra notepad, but I so have some poster paper. We were making movie poster of a movie we would star in to go without comic books. And that I hope you can be better prepared next observation as to not disrupt my class and take time away from their institutional time. He bosses just smirked. Phase 3, I was now calling my new best friend, her boss's boss, whenever she was late getting to school, and he would do a random stop by if he was close. So he was able to document that she was not showing up to work on time and not submitted the paperwork to have it be taken out of her leave minutes. Overall, we get he at least 2 times a week for a solid month. I think he even asked someone from HR to come to our school to see for herself at 9 a.m, and she still wasn't even there. Now time for phase 4, which was my favorite one. Getting the parents on board. I first started talking to a parent that seemed to always be late picking up their students. I would chat about it and they said it was hard to get there on time, and they often had to leave early. And when I told them about our aftercare, they would tell me that it costed too much for them. However, I would inform them that since we are a Title I school, that after-school care was free and paid for by the district, and gave her a nifty flyer I made up with the website to fill out the forms and which ones to fill out. This made word spread around to parents paying the contractors directly that it was supposed to be free. And boy, was that a fun PTA meeting to go to. I also made sure the principal knew it was me that informed the parents about that free after-school care program. After this, there were countless investigations at our school, with head administration from the central office stopping by our school, auditors, and our union finally got involved and tried to play the heroes, victims of this incident. The outcome. The second half of the year was very chill. My new best friend made sure that my teacher support plan was taken off my teaching record, and my principal was not allowed to do my second term evaluations, nor was she allowed to do any informal observations. The after-school care contractor was fired and taken over by one recommended by the district, and my students were making amazing strides in their posters and comics. At the end of the year, when we were getting our assignments, jobs for next year, my principal made one last attempt to get me to leave and told me, our budget doesn't have the funds for an art teacher next year, and that I might want to see employment elsewhere. I laughed in her face and said, nice try. My position is paid for by a state bond and isn't affected by your budget from the district. If there isn't anything else, I'll be leaving now. And walked out. I could hear her slam her desk and swear up a storm as I closed the door. At the end of the year, I had my one student share his comic book about how the principal told him to give me trouble in class at our school's talent show, leaving the already pissed off parents more pissed that an adult would tell a child to act in such a way. I even think she had a shoe thrown at her when she ran on stage to stop him from finishing his comic. To the surprise of no one, the last day of school she announced on the intercoms after students had left that she would be resigning from our school to move to a different position where she was needed and that she would miss almost all of us. I came to find out after stalking her on LinkedIn 2 years later that she had to get a job out of the district an hour drive away to get another admin job, but only stayed for a year and then had to step down to teaching English at a different school in another district the next year. And for those of you wondering how my student's comic book ended, well, the art hero rallied the students against the anger principal to make her see the errors of her ways, but the angry principal could not become happy, so she left and the power of happiness filled the school once again. The revenge was really epic. The teacher did a wonderful job by exposing principal's unethical actions with the help of parents and students. The final satisfactory blow came out when the principal resigned and left the district. It was really an amazing revenge. Kudos to the teacher. Don't mess with the teacher. Our next story is from Son Don't Play. Don't want to let me tinker? AL rightly then, let's do business then. My grandpa was a successful man, and in his mid-60s, he decided he wanted to take a step back, so he started selling off his businesses. He sold his various businesses and spent the next few years traveling. As he approached 70, he got bored in addition to a few new grandchildren, so he needed a bigger house. He sold the old home that he had bought after he got back from Vietnam and bought this massive house on this large piece of land. This property also came with a massive steel barn. Looked like this. Not sure if he had ever told anyone about his plans, but right after he got the property, he dumped a ton of money into tools and equipment and converted his barn into a mechanic's dream. Some things I remember having. He had a professional lift, capable of lifting full-size trucks. He had those professional oil catchers you see at Quick Lubes. He had a dedicated air compressor system that was designed to power all his power tools. He had a tire machine to mount new tires. He had so much equipment. His tool corner was a massive corner of this massive barn. His plan? To fix cars, especially for people in need. He lived in a rural community if you didn't have a car that was a big problem, so he let everyone know at his local church that he was willing to work on their cars if they provided the parts. He only took a few jobs a week. He was doing this to enjoy himself and help those that needed it. He'd of course change oil, change the transmission fluid, and all kinds of various repairs. My grandpa was a talented mechanic. However, he kept the amount of work limited. He was also selective. If you were in need, he'd want to fix your cars. If you had the means to pay, he'd decline and ask you to go elsewhere. One day, the owner of the local car dealership came by and told my grandpa he needed to stop fixing other people's cars because he wasn't properly licensed, didn't have the proper insurances, and was hurting his business. My grandpa explained this is just his hobby. He only does a few cars a week. The owner told him he needs to cut it out, or he's going to sue my grandpa out of business. My grandpa said he laughed over this. What business was this guy going to sue him out of? The owner walked out. A little while later, my grandpa got served. He was being sued by the owner of the car dealership. My grandpa thought he'd take a trip down to the dealership and try and reason with the man. My grandpa hoped he could come to an understanding. My grandpa spoke to the owner and basically explained, he only works on people cars who are down on their luck. The fact is, the people cars he fixes probably couldn't afford to pay a professional dealership to fix their vehicle. He only does a few cars a week. He's not all that interested in getting into a fight over his hobby, but he is not going back down. Well, they ended up in court. By this point, my grandpa had hired a lawyer who was able to get the city to approve a commercial garage on his property. It helped that he lived on the outskirts of town and had 6 acres of property. The court told my grandpa his auto repair shop is operating illegally. If my grandpa wants to continue, he's going to need to get a business license, get the proper insurances, and if he does that, he will be good to go. Now, what do you think a man who has nothing but time and money in this situation is going to do? He's going to get his business license and insurances, of course, which he did, and that surprised no one. But he went further. Got a dedicated phone line ran into his shop, hired a full-time mechanic, put up a professional sign, set up a little waiting area with a water cooler. What shocked everyone even more? He ran a local TV ad saying he was a pay-what-you-can mechanic shop, reservations only. Put ads in the local paper saying the same thing. Yes, folks, that's right. My grandpa is not only a licensed, legal auto repair business, he has a certified mechanic on his payroll, and he's running ads. As for his prices, they were quite simple you either. Bring the parts yourself and pay the mechanic whatever you wanted. Mechanic got a separate wage from my grandpa, so if you couldn't pay anything, that was fine. Had my grandpa sourced the parts, he'd charge at your parts and you'd pay the mechanic whatever you want. My grandpa started taking jobs, and boy did that shop gets busy. It was impossible to beat Grandpa's price. Grandpa was essentially paying to fix your car for you. My grandpa would spend his days with the mechanic that he had hired working on cars. He loved it. The owner of the local car dealership was furious. He sued my grandpa again. They went to court, and the judge basically said, my grandpa owned a licensed, insured auto repair business. What he charges his customers for his services is completely up to him, even if that means doing the work for free. About a year or so later, my grandpa gets a call from a lawyer who says he's representing a potential buyer of the local car dealership. However, the buyer wants to speak to my grandpa. My grandpa agreed. He sat down with the new potential buyer who expressed his concerns about buying the dealership. Service is a major profit center for a dealership, and he's considering buying the local dealership. However, he doesn't want to buy the dealership if my grandpa is going to keep operating the way he is, because it's impossible for a for-profit business to compete against someone selling their services for free. My grandpa agrees that there's no way someone looking to make a profitable business could ever compete against him. So they came to an agreement. The owner buys the dealership, and my grandpa would only work on a few cars a week, maybe 5, 6. Only work on people cars who are down on their luck and probably too poor to be able to pay a professional dealership to fix their car. Any parts he needs, he will buy from the dealership. Any work he declined, he'd refer to the dealership. The new owner of the dealership agreed to, dealership must agree to let my grandpa be. Stay out of his way. Dealership must hire his mechanic. They shook hands, the local dealership was bought out, and for the next 9 years, my grandpa would fix people's cars who were down on their luck. If he had to buy parts, he'd buy from the dealership. And as for that mechanic my grandpa hired, he ended up becoming the service manager and did quite well for himself. As for my grandpa, when he was 80, he had a heart attack in his shop. Luckily, one of his grandkids was there, and they got him to the hospital, and he made a full recovery. But the doctor told him his body couldn't handle working in that garage anymore. He ended up shutting down after that. For the next 3 years, he looked out his kitchen window, staring at his shop, remembering all the fun he had in his garage. He passed away at 83, surrounded by friends and family. TL. Dr. Grandpa just wanted to fix some cars. The local dealership got mad at him because he was crushing them, sued him. My grandpa got serious, put them out of business, and made a deal with the new owner of the dealership that he would still operate, but at a level that the owner could still make a profit so long as they let my grandpa be. The revenge was really epic, and I would give Grandpa the title of the father of pay-what-you-can services. The grandpa did a wonderful job by offering this service and driving the dealership out of the business. The next story from Arnott. I got you a souvenir. Yeah, I got you fired from the post office. Edit, TLDR at end with some comments. Background. Sit back and enjoy a story about some revenge I achieved at the US Postal Service back in the 1990s that cost a bullying full-time carrier his union job. In summer of 1991, I found a summer job as a casual carrier for the USPS. They used to hire summer temps to cover for all the full-time carriers who mostly took their vacations in the summer. The USPS has rules that things had to be delivered within certain time windows. People could get fired if they took too long to do tasks. Carriers were both openly and secretly monitored and timed on tasks, and we had the first computerized time system I ever saw. They would be secretly followed a few times per year to be sure they were working hard the entire time they were outside the post office. The post office building even had secret back hallways, passive sound monitoring, and hidden raised viewing areas where they could see the sorting floor unobserved. Cameras and microphones were hell expensive back then, so this was all done using tricky architecture and the eyes and ears of the postal inspectors. We were supposed to walk over and punch in and out of tasks so that they could track productivity to the second. People walking a delivery route were expected to do it fast, and better routes went to faster carriers. Slow carriers got mercilessly hassled to be faster and were disciplined for slowness. Look at Newman on Seinfeld. Going postal, due to overwork, was not really a joke there because people would flip out and murder their bosses. I hear it's worse now with GPS. Pre-internet, there used to be a huge volume of mail that got shuffled around the country every day. Quantities of mail that you would find hard to believe compared to what we see now. I was a broke college student home for the summer and was willing to work any hours they gave me, so the supervisors liked me. I was also very friendly with most of the full-time FT carriers because I was a good worker and didn't rock the boat. Also, for other reasons that you'll see below. I'm a fairly big guy, 6'5", or about 195 flilin, about 210 lbs back then, and I could carry a lot of weight, so that also made management happy. I was also in my early 20s with long legs, so I could move fast, carrying a lot of weight. Sorting mail back then was labor-intensive and took a lot of time to learn. I had a regular route that I would deliver in the afternoons that was sorted by a regular. I would usually do oddball delivery stuff in the mornings, help move heavy things around, do special deliveries, etc. I would also deliver for FT carriers that went on vacation or whose T6 was on vacation. Side note, mail delivery is 6x per week, but FT carriers only work 5 days per week. The T6 is a FT carrier who did the 6th day for 5 routes. That way, it worked out that everyone only worked 5 days per week. At the time, a lot of retail catalogues were mailed to houses. A lot of them. Some were substantially bigger than current magazines. We also delivered magazines, ads, packages, and samples. A lot of companies would mail free samples of products like laundry detergent, shampoo, and other liquids to be delivered to every house on the route. These were the bane of the carrier's existence because they were bulky and heavy. This slows you down and is physically taxing. Usually, carriers would divide the very heavy stuff up and deliver it throughout the week. On to the revenge. I was assigned to do the T6 work for Dave, name changed, for a few months. Fucking Dave. Picture a failed physical education teacher in his 40s. Bad moustache, about 5'7", wore knockoff sunglasses like Magnum PIs, and had an opinion about everything. Dave learns he has me as his T6 and decides he will leave all of the heavy stuff for me. So once a week, I got confronted with the entire week's worth of heavy mail for this a-hole's route. I confronted him about it and he basically laughed and said there was nothing I could do about it. The other FT carriers didn't like Dave much, but I was a temp and he was there permanently, so I was encouraged to just suck it up. I went to our boss and escalated to our postmaster, but was told that he was FT and I was a temp, so I just had to deal with it. If the mail needed to be delivered that day to meet the deadline, I had to make it happen. The postmaster's exact words were, "Just deliver every piece of mail for the route as fast as you can and don't worry about the time it takes or anything else. You're making huge OT on this route." They did talk to Dave and the most egregious stuff stopped, but I was still doing most of the hard work on this route. I mentioned earlier that everyone was always on the clock and tracked. In my first week, some of the nicer people took me aside at the beginning of the summer and made it clear to me that I was not to move quickly when delivering FT carriers' routes because it could make them look bad and cause trouble for them. As a temp, I should always take longer than the FT carriers because, 1, my job was limited and the USPS did not really track temps closely. 2, I had zero experience, so everything should take me longer. 3, this was a union shop and they would hate to have to kick my butt for messing up their jobs. And 4, most of these people were awesome and I wanted to be a team player. So I was incentivized to move slowly and not make the FT people look bad. Side note, I am very pro-union and pro-labor, so this is not intended to knock unions, but the context is needed. I decided to wreck Dave's job since he was such a bullying little tool. I requisitioned 2 additional mail carrier bags. These are the over-the-shoulder satchels you see all the time. I was asked why, and I specifically told them it was to be able to carry all of the heavy items on Dave's route without having to keep going back to my Jeep to reload along the way. The postmaster personally approved it. After doing Dave's route 1 to 3 times per week, he called in sick a lot too, for a few weeks, I knew If very well and was staying on top of the heavy stuff. Once I was comfortable with the route, I started running it. I would literally load up 3 mail bags for each segment of the route and jog or run his entire route. Dave's route took him about 4.5 hours per day to walk. This was probably accurate for him, and he'd been on the route for several years. I would finish it in 3 hours or less. Every day, rain or shine. No matter how many magazines, samples or packages were waiting. No one really noticed I was coming back so quickly and punching back out of delivering his route when I was only doing it a few times per week. I would come back, pick up other work, and get that done. The fun started when Dave took a 2-week vacation and I handled his route 6 days per week. Since I was doing the work right, there was never a backlog of heavy items landing on me once per week. This made it even easier to jog or run his route as I was back to using 1 mailbag, and fast walking, jogging was enough to get it done quickly. I frequently got it done in under 3 hours and never took longer than about 3.5 hours. My personal best was under 2.5 hours. I got pulled aside by my supervisor and the postmaster after the first week. They asked me about my timekeeping practices, and I confirmed that I was doing things correctly. I would punch into his route on departure, keep the appropriate logs, and punch back in when I got back. The postmaster then asked me about Dave's route. I played completely dumb. He noted that I complained about the mail volume several weeks ago and that I used to take 6, 7, or more hours to get it delivered. I explained that I was spreading the heavy deliveries out over the whole week and that had really made a difference. He asked me if I was really delivering all the mail and whether I was hiding or throwing away mail. A serious problem if true. I got very offended and told him I delivered every piece of mail for the route, every day. Then I dropped the bomb. I told him I was having trouble understanding why this route was budgeted 4.5 hours to deliver, when it clearly could be done much faster than that. I pointed out that it was a lot of dense multifamily housing, which means less walking. I told him lots of people on the route seemed surprised that I did not want a soda pop or to sit down and talk for a minute like Dave always did with them. Pure lies. All in my innocent, gosh, I want to help the USPS voice. I told the postmaster that I was delivering all the mail as fast as I could and not worrying about anything else. I jogged the route again for the next 6 days and kept getting it done in much less time than Dave. Dave did not know about any of this. He made a point of finding me on his first day back to ask how I enjoyed doing all the hard work for him while he was vacationing. I told him I'd learned a lesson about how to treat your co-workers. He laughed at me and went back to sorting mail. He came back a few minutes later and said he got me a souvenir. He then pulled his middle finger out of his pocket. Classic Dave. That was my last week at the USPS, and I headed back to college. I kept in touch with some of the friends I'd made there, and one of them was very happy to tell me that Dave was fired about 2 months after I left. Due to the massive discrepancy in how long it took me and him to deliver the route, the higher-ups audited his route and discovered that he actually was lollygagging, taking unauthorized breaks, and apparently having an affair with a woman on his route. All on the clock. I, on the other hand, was in great physical shape after all that running and had pockets full of cash for that semester. His regular T6 also got most of the heavy stuff dumped on her, so she didn't get into any trouble for her delivery times because she was swamped with heavy mail on her day. She actually bid for and got the route full-time when Dave was shown the door. I have more stories of my glorious summer at the USPS, but crushing Dave is one of the high points. Edit TLDR. Worked at USPS for a summer. Co-worker who liked to pick on temps gets fired after I make it look like he's not doing his job right. And it turns out he really isn't doing his job right. Thanks for all the comments and awards. I didn't think a 30-year-old story about a summer job would be such a hit. For those saying that I could have handled this better, you're right. But this is pro-revenge not followed the rule book. Also, Dave was an AH to all the temps, not just me. He just chose me as his special whipping boy for that summer, and I decided not to grin and bear it. The revenge was really satisfying and cool. OP did a wonderful job by exposing the reality of his bully and getting him fired. Dave's unauthorized breaks and slacking off finally cost him his job and, of course, reputation. The revenge was really satisfying. The next story from Epic Winter Wolf. Keep kicking myself and other students off our remote desktop link for the heck of it. Enjoy the consequences. So this happened last October in 2020, and I feel it's finally safe to share it. Given the situation at that time, going to campus was a no-go, so everything was online. As such, a lot of programs used for coursework, which were only on PC, needed a remote link for those of us on Macs or other devices. This link connects students to assigned desktops physically on campus through an application like Citrix. It would only allow students onto the desktops when another class was not remotely using that lab at the time, and at night when registered classes were done. The on-campus computers would show that their drives were in use, so the students who lived on campus would know that someone was remotely accessing it. Well, I was taking a course in remote sensing, which required access to programs such as ArcMap, ArcGIS, R, and Eridas. You can look them up. They were only available on PC, so I, as a MacBook user, needed to use the remote link. The issue started at the start of October, when I was working on an assignment in ArcMap. I was really startled when I was suddenly kicked out, and then furious because I hadn't had the chance to save my latest input. I then went back to the web page, re-input my student credentials, and logged into a different desktop. Not 2 minutes later was I logged out again. Rightly peeved, I emailed the professor and TAs about it and moved on to other homework. I figured it was a bug that it would soon be fixed. No, it continued throughout the entire fogging month. I ended up having to work on my remote labs between 9 p.m. and 2 a.m. as I literally was not able to work during the day without being kicked off. It was really annoying, especially since I couldn't even work during my assigned lab time. Other students started reporting this, and we'd get a lot of emails from IT. Updates, patches, and things like that we had to install to try and patch this bug. And nothing worked. It was painful. I decided that enough was enough and took a train to campus after my online morning classes. If it was going to keep booting me off the remote, then I would just go in person. I completed the online health check, got to campus no problem, and made my way to the building that housed all the PCs. Yes, we have a building that houses all the PCs for computer classes. Anyways, I went up and towards the lab that my credentials were registered to. I'm going to be honest. I wasn't expecting what I saw, but I sure was damn pissed. Through the windows into the lab, I saw two guys going from PC to PC, logging students off. At first I couldn't believe it, and then I got furious. They were laughing about screwing with hard-working students. I will call them dumb and dumber. I decided to get some payback. I pulled out my phone and placed it beside the window, and it was partially hidden by the trash bin inside the classroom, recording them and what they were doing. They didn't notice me, thank God, and I got onto my laptop, remote linking to my phone. I then got onto the university social media page and started to live stream the video from my phone. I put a title along the lines of, "Found the bugs kicking students off remote desktop. Video has been deleted, and I will explain soon." It didn't take long for fellow students to take notice of it, and it went viral within 30 minutes. Names were soon put out as Dumb and Dumber were recognized, and there was a lot of hate in the comments. Even campus police replied, asking for the location. I was all too happy to give it. It was then I saw on the stream that Dumb pulled out his phone and he started freaking out. He had noticed the stream and that it was live. I quickly rushed to grab my phone and retreat, and that's when Dumber rushed out the door and friggin' tackled me. We started brawling. It was self-defense, as he kept attacking me to grab my phone. And then I saw Dumb going for my laptop, which was hosting the stream, which was still being recorded from my phone. So, I kicked Dumber between the legs while elbowing him in the neck before jumping Dumb. To be honest, I don't really know what happened next, but I do remember campus police having to pull me off Dumb. Apparently, I had full-bodied tackled him away from my laptop and he punched me in the face. With me, apparently grabbing his carry-on bag, bashing him over the head with it, accidentally cracking his laptop. Oops. So, anyways, the fight was broken up and we were all taken down to the campus police office. To make a very long story short, I got a relative slap on the wrist for my part of it. Had to do some on-campus community service, but my record was kept clean. Thankfully, I was not charged for the fight or the laptop, as I was able to prove self-defense, and that they hit me first, tried to destroy my property intentionally, which made it worse for them. I was let off on the laptop for a technicality, as I was punched in the face, and had no idea that he even had a laptop in his carry-on. Phew. As for Dumb and Dumber, I was called in to testify at each of their hearings in December. Turns out kicking students off remote links was considered a very grave academic offence, as it was intentional tampering with others' work. The video stream I took was a big part of the evidence against them, and CCTV proved that they had been doing it for weeks. In almost all the computer labs, they had intentionally messed with over 100 students. Adding to attacking me, I had a nice shiner for a month, and my devices, instead of running, they got into pretty hot water. Now, the reason this wasn't discovered sooner was due to the fact that this remote link was new to us, and IT was still working through the bugs. I don't know exactly what happened next, as they just needed me to come in, masked, and tell what I did and remembered. However, I did get notification in my email in March this past year that 2 students were expelled for intentional tampering of other students' work. Can you guess who? Yup, Dumb and Dumber got the boot for their dumb actions. It gets even better though. Turns out they were here on student visas, which meant that not only were they expelled from the university with a black mark on their records, they were also given the boot from the country, and most definitely back to their very disappointed parents. Maybe it's karma, but they got publicly exposed on a live stream for their actions for all the school to see, which was taken down due to it needing to be evidence against them and all. But, yep, they were expelled twice for their dumb actions, and with their names in campus infamy for their stunt. Hope they've learned their lesson. Edit. Wanted to add that they were actually put on a cargo flight home, as their country wasn't allowing passenger flights. They had to go because, without their visas, they were in the country illegally, which would land them in even deeper hot water. The university actually took mercy on them and paid for the flight. And I agree. They may have acted stupid, but that's no reason to have to deal with border security or whatnot. I only know this because I ran into, and was able to talk with, one of the campus officers who told me what happened. I went in person for a lab this recent September. So, yeah. Those guys had to take a cargo flight home. I think the uncomfortable experience they would have had was enough of a punishment compared to being in lockup until their country's borders opened, or until other arrangements could be made. Edit 2. Wow, didn't expect it to blow up like it did. Truly astonishing. Thank you all. Edit 3. Okay, wow. Looks like I need to correct some very inaccurate comments. First off, I'm not from Poland. Beautiful place though. I'm in Canada, that actually exists, and am a former American citizen. Second, I can't say exactly, but Dumb and Dumber are from East Europe or Asia, I'm not certain. Thirdly, sadly, Canadians are actually smarter and politer on average than most Americans. Something I have noticed. Also, this isn't a place to have discussions about whether Apple is good or not. This is about pro-revenge, and I'd rather not have my reapproved post locked down because of you guys going off topic. So please, stop. Edit 4. Seriously, is no one actually reading the first sentence? This is a repost of my story that was originally taken down due to a miscommunication between the mods over Rule 6. That issue is now resolved. So I'm reposting. Thank you. Edit 5. Do I seriously have to clarify this? Fine. I'm a 6 foot plus tall woman who works out weekly and during my childhood, and teens excelled in fighting sports and self-defense classes such as karate, judo, jiu-jitsu, boxing, and enjoyed and excelled in basketball, volleyball, dodgeball, I consider it a sport, baseball, softball, swimming, cycling, skiing, and recently added archery, all while excelling in my science classes. I am also broad-shouldered, and from all those sports I enjoy, very, very strong. I know how to fight and how to take down others much larger than I. In high school, I beat up bullies, male bullies, on the daily. Even though I haven't been as active in the past few years due to university homework crunch, I have stayed very fit. So yes, I could take Skinny Dumb and Skinner Dumber, who were both shorter than I by a foot at minimum, easily. They just happened to get the drop on me. I still kicked their butts, and they're lucky I didn't break any bones. And the reason I didn't press charges, or really notice if charges of assault on me were pressed, was because I just wanted to move on and do all the homework that had piled up due to Dumb and Dumber. The term was only 4 months, sept to dec, with December being final exam time. So I'm sorry if I didn't care about what the university was doing with them. I just wanted to get my homework in, so I didn't fail my courses. Also, can no one read? Like, seriously? OP did a very good job by exposing the 2 students who had been sabotaging others' work. The revenge was really epic, and OP destroyed academic career of Dumb and Dumber by getting them fired and deported back to their country. The revenge was really satisfying. What do you think about it? Bye-bye for now. Let's see you tomorrow.